All right, so today is December 22nd, 2024. This is the Strategy Task Force fifth session. My name is Louise Campbell Anthony. I am the affiliate director here with the Strategy Task Force with the Peacekeeping Task Force here. So we're going to get started with our meeting. We're starting a little late, but we're going to get started here. So let me share my screen. Share my screen. Okay. All right, so I'll put the agenda there in the chat. And we're going to start, if any assemblies are here, represented here, go ahead and put your name and the state you're on in the chat. And if anyone are here who would like to be on the Strategy Task Force, go ahead and put your name in the chat and your contact information and what state you're on. So the first thing we're going to start with, I did send out the session 4 interim report. This one here, in between our sessions, I send out an interim report so that you all can glean from whatever information, inspirations that I'm getting in between sessions and how I'm incorporate any of the feedback you all send to me in between sessions. And then I get that goes into the report. So this is the report that I sent out last week. We'll glean over this and then and talk about training of the assemblies, because we talked about the need for there to be some training for the assemblies when they go out there to do their public meetings. So there can be some standardized outlines and content for them to cover at their meetings. And this will make them more comfortable as well and in conducting the meetings, and it will give some consistency about our message as the Federation of 50 coming out to the public as the American government. The other thing we're going to go over is an email that I got today from our executive director here at the PKTF. He wants me to go over these advisory input that he has here. I'm going to go over this email here as well. So as I go, I'm going to do this one here first, and then we're going to go over the session report and how the ideas that we want to add to that. So the email he put together here, as I read this here with you all, I want you to keep in mind that the Peacekeeping Task Force is involved mainly in phase 3. Now, I don't know if you all have seen all of the implementation guides that I have put together for this project from the beginning, but they are in process and being updated as we go along, as new ideas and inspirations get added to the project. So I put in the chat all the updated implementation guides. So we have first in the chat, we have the 6-phase implementation guides for the think tank to implement. So we have that, and wherever you see yellow, that means I have changed something based on the ideas that we've been coming up with at the think tank or with the strategy task force. That's what the yellow means. And it might be changed even more. So you have that updated one in the chat. This one is the 6 phases that the tank is the workforce for, that they help, these volunteers help to put all the 6 phases together. Then we have, then I have put together an implementation guide here for just the phase 3, where the Peacekeeping Task Force and the peacekeeping officers of every assembly will be involved mainly with this particular phase. So this one I update as we go along as well. And where you see blue is actually a change altogether of what the thought process was that was added to this phase 3. Yellow is just me updating more material for the current process that I had thought of originally. So that's what you will see in the implementation guide for phase 3, where the Peacekeeping Task Force and our peacekeeping officers will be engaged in this particular implementation guide. Now, I got that in the chat. Now, based on the information we've been developing so far from all of our interim reports and all the inputs, I came up with, well, and I thought it would be necessary to come up with another implementation guide, which is what we're going to go over when I get to the session 4 interim report. And that I also put in the chat. This is the newest one, implementation guide that I put together. And this one is going to be for the American state assemblies, where the teeth is going to be implemented in the public meetings. So I thought it'd be helpful as part of training. I took the session 4 interim report information and put it all in this implementation guide and added a few things that we've already talked about to fill it out, fill out the whole concept of what these public meetings, how they should be conducted and what content should be in them. So we'll get to this one here once we finish our email. So as I'm going over the email here that Executive Director Joe Hayes put together, I want you to be thinking about the Peacekeeping Task Force's role in the entire project. And so their role would be here, remember this design? Their role would be here in phase 3, this section here, all this section here. These 3 graduated interactions is where phase 3 starts. And then all the way to phase to tier 4 with the negotiations is all PKTF involvement. All right. So as I'm reading the email, think about phase 3 and how he's advising how we can address the concerns that the challenges that we will have when we implement execute phase 3 and what ideas we can incorporate. If you look at this chart, I want to mention this because the mind map that I just showed you might be too much for some people to grasp, but this one is a simplified form of that same thing. As I'm going over the email, the part that he's going to be referring to is this part right here. This section right here. Assembly peacekeepers, securing the Capitol. How the peacekeeping officers, the liaison, the militia, the continental sheriff, the continental marshal, the county sheriffs, how they're going to be interacting with the de facto. Keep this in mind as we're going over the email. So let's get to the email. I'll skip a few things in here, but I'm going to try to highlight the main things. I'm writing to provide detailed advisory insights regarding the negotiation phase of the urgent project as discussed during session 3 of the Peacekeeping Task Force, it means the Strategy Task Force, at the 57:35-minute mark on the YouTube channel. This moment in that session was pivotal as it brought forward the concept of negotiation and the idea of calling to the carpet as ripe for discussion. The purpose of this email is to outline a thoughtful, phased approach to negotiations that aligns with the overarching intent of providing remedies to all Americans while accounting for the anticipated challenge of transitioning from the de facto system to one that honors lawful governance. This advisory contribution is also intended to serve as an example for other participants and remote advisors of the Strategy Task Force. It is hoped that this will inspire clarity and actionable contributions from others who may feel uncertain about how they can support this initiative during meetings and in between the sessions. I kindly ask that you read it to the upcoming session, as it may help stir thought and provide direction for all involved. So as he's evaluating that the Strategy Task Force replays, this is what he's gathering as far as what he sees. The purpose of negotiation and the phased intent. The Resurgence Project is a monumental effort aimed at addressing decades-long harms caused by systemic fraud. Ultimate goal is to provide remedies owed to all Americans who are politically status corrected, while also respecting those who chose to remain as 14th Amendment de facto corporate subjects. This dual recognition ensures that everyone's choices are honored while prioritizing lawful governance for those who seek it. However, it is important to acknowledge that achieving total political status recognition for all individuals may be too much for the incorporated establishment to manage under current transition circumstances. This has not yet been observed in practice, but is anticipated to be a tumultuous undertaking. As such, a phased approach to negotiations should be considered as part of the initial resurgence project efforts. Now, when he's saying a phased approach, so step by step. So as we saw, as we put together here in, let me go back. Yeah, gradual steps. So remember, in the process, we have the PKTF liaison and the militia first addressing the de facto, the U.S. Secretary of State and the attorney generals and the county sheriffs. The first address them to establish that we have the employee-employee relationship. That's first. Because if we can't get on the same page of what our relationship is, then it's going to create more conflict with us trying to give them directives to follow through, which is what we're having now with our assemblies, trying to give the governors or the state secretary of state some directives, but they're not responding accordingly as an employee. They're responding like we're constituents. So we have to get that first level established where they recognize us and we prove to them that we are the employers. So he says, first, phase 1, immediate recognition of public servants. Advocate for immediate recognition of politically status-corrected American state citizens who have been elected to serve their constituencies within land and soil jurisdictions. This is a keen approach that he's advising us to fine-tune. American state citizens are elected officials, just like U.S. Secretary of State and the governor. They are elected officials. So this is something that they can relate to if we approach them the same way that they're used to. This is what Joe is saying. That's what I'm getting from it. And then he says, who have been elected to serve their constituency within the land and soil jurisdictions. So at this point, as we're sending out our public servants who've been elected on some state assembly to address them who have been elected on their jurisdiction, then it sounds like he's saying that there will be we have a better chance to actually get them to communicate, because we can meet them on the same level. Your constituency is in the international sea jurisdiction. Our constituency is in the land and soil jurisdiction. We can meet them on the same level by presenting ourselves with our citizens first. These public servants can act as intermediaries, ensuring that business within these jurisdictions can be conducted lawfully on behalf of their constituencies while broader recognition efforts continue. Phase 2, gradual recognition of all politically status-corrected individuals. Expand the recognition to include all men and women who have corrected their political status and are on public record as American state nationals, along with their family members. This phase ensures a structured transition that respects both individual sovereignty and systemic limitations during this period of change. Phase 3, comprehensive remedies for all Americans. Work toward long-term solutions that address systemic harms while respecting those who choose to remain under the de facto system as 14th Amendment corporate subjects. This phase represents the full realization of the Resurgence Project's goals, ensuring lawful governance and remedy for all who seek it. So I can see where he's saying from the American state citizens approach first, establish that relationship, establish that we are on the same, on level playing fields, internationally, and then as the citizens are being recognized, then move to recognize all the nationals. Yeah, I can see that. I recognize all the nationals in a structured transitional phase. Okay. I want y'all to think about that, because I'm going to ask you what your perspective is on that approach. Now, again, we're still talking about phase 3 only, and where the peacekeeping task force officers are going to be involved. But here where he's suggesting this phase here, this phase ensures a structured transition that respects both individual sovereignty and systemic limitations during the period of change. So here where we expand out to the American state nationals for their recognition, we did discuss before adding to our strategy to go up another notch to the U.S. Secretary of State to get established American state nationals as a non-citizen national definition when they're doing for diplomatic immunity status. I'm going to remind you of that one. Go ahead, Lavelle.
Yes, I also, I just want to make a comment to what Joe was saying. It does make perfect sense. Instead of going and looking for others, they're already the elected officials that are there. So we can already have them to, reach out. And also like the international business pillar for those states who've gotten those up or working. Those are the ones who are going to already be noticing, like the governor or, the sheriffs, or speaking on behalf of the assembly. I believe that like they're all AS citizens. So they are already going to be in position. So why not go ahead and have them to be that that spokesperson to go ahead and speak to, to like the sheriffs and all that, instead of looking for new new people coming in. You already have people who are already on that pillar or already elected, and that kind of give them their exercise also in working in their elected positions as well. So I think he brought out a great point. And I really like that chart that you brought up. It's a lot clearer and a lot cleaner to follow as well. I yield. Yes, that one.
So what I was looking for as I was scrolling through is the aspect of getting American state nationals recognized across the board. Now, we did add to the project the aspect of going above the governor to the U.S. Heads of offices, Secretary of State, Attorney General, here and here. At that level, getting the American state nationals recognized in the diplomatic immunity status. But these sections here would be initiated by the PKTF Directorate, the Chief Continental Marshal, and the Fiduciary is what we were thinking here at this level. So to get the American state nationals recognized, American state citizens recognized, and then the broader scope of the American state nationals recognized, I think we should do them both at the same time, actually. We would have to go above the governor to actually get the American state nationals recognized across the board. That's why we added this section and this section. And that's the diplomatic immunity section here. This diplomatic immunity section where the passports come in. That's where we get American state nationals recognized across the board by getting that title included in non-citizen national status of the passport. So that's where that came in our strategy right now. Anticipated challenges. It is expected that initial outreach efforts may encounter resistance and marginalization from municipal state-of-state leadership, state law enforcement, and state border defense command leadership. The American State Assembly concept may be perceived as unfamiliar or even purposefully disregarded by these entities due to its divergence from established norms. This underscores the need for a strategic approach that balances ambition with practicality. Additionally, given that the de facto establishment operates with expertise in citizenship and views much of the population as citizens under its jurisdiction, it stands to reason that negotiations must account for this perspective. A fair approach would be to advocate for recognition, at least in an interim capacity, of politically status-corrected American state citizens as lawful public servants capable of representing their constituencies. Proposed negotiation strategies. So here it actually fits in with the proposed negotiation strategies. It actually fits in with what we have outlined in our phase 3 implementation guide that we've added. So the primary strategy is to use evidence-based advocacy, meaning present compelling empirical evidence of decades-long corporate constructive fraud and its resulting harms in a professional and solution-oriented manner. While this evidence is vast, really too much to describe, it must be distilled into concise narratives that emphasize urgency without overwhelming stakeholders. Now, secondary strategy, limited recognition. If full recognition provides too challenging initially, advocate for limited acknowledgement of American state citizens as public servants who can act on behalf of their constituencies until broader recognition becomes feasible. This strategy ensures progress while respecting systemic limitations during this transitional period. Tone and approach. The entire campaign must remain firm yet peaceful, demonstrating respect for all parties involved despite the seriousness of its mission and accusations. Context from session 3. So during session 3, at the timestamp mark, it became clear that negotiation is a critical aspect of the Resurgence Project's success. The concept of calling to the carpet reflects the seriousness with which these discussions must be approached, particularly given the levied accusations and actions required to provide immediate remedy. The observation was made that total political status correction recognition may overwhelm the de facto incorporated establishment under current circumstances, a reality that has not been yet observed but is anticipated based on historical patterns and systemic inertia. Therefore, incorporating negotiation strategies into the initial phase of the Resurgence Project is essential for ensuring progress while maintaining alignment with its ultimate objectives. Conclusion, the Resurgence Project represents a historic opportunity for lawfulness through peaceful means while addressing decades-long systemic harm. By adopting a phased approach to negotiations, the Strategy Task Force can ensure progress towards its goal while remaining adaptable to anticipated challenges. You can read the rest of that. So as Joe is pointing out, he sees the benefit in the graduated effort of how we approach our de facto employees. So I'm going to go down here. The tier 2, in the implementation guide for the Peacekeeping Task Force, I put in the chat there. The specific part I want you to review and go over is section 2 here. Let me see where it is. Most effective phase 3 strategy. Bring all 3 jurisdictions into the conversation and to the table. The international sea, the international land, and the national soil. And how do we bring them to the table? I want you to go over the next week, go over this section here in light of what Joe has advised. Go over this section to determine and debate in your own mind if the approach in bringing everybody to the negotiating table is solid at this point of what in our implementation of this. So we do have lead out issuing an international public notice to the public. Now this part is really for the assemblies, but then and they apply the public pressures for the assemblies. But then when you move here to this section, secure control over the corporate heads, this section explains the graduated phased effort. Our first line of, I call it our first line of defense, but it's not really a defense. We don't really, because we're in the offensive position. We are the employers. So the first line in addressing the de facto would be our liaisons. We present the service contracts, the jurisdictional divisions of law, national soil, international land, and then your jurisdiction, international sea. We would have to present these and educate them about and agree, yes, there is a difference in jurisdiction. Yes, there's a difference in constituency. Your constituency is US, our constituency is American. All of this is first to get on the same page. Historical documentary evidence to the Secretary of State, the Governor, Attorney General, the county sheriffs that proves employee-employer relationship and disarm this sovereign citizen pejorative. And Joe did a whole series about the sovereign citizen pejorative. You can read that on Peacekeeping Task Force website. So that would be our first line. And these are our American state citizens who are our peacekeeping task force. Who is our peacekeeping officers that's going to be presenting this to the de facto employee. They're going to be presenting this education about the jurisdictional difference, about the service contracts, that the constitutions that they're supposed to be abiding by, and establishing this relationship and establish that we do have a relationship and getting that agreement. Then in this, the next approach, the second line, that conversation has gone on, and we have to determine at this point, how long will we stay in that mode? Because there's going to be some pushback. So how long do we stay in that mode to try to get peacefully on the same page before we move to the second line? And the second line is with liaisons and county assembly sheriffs to solicit for the assistance of the de facto sheriffs to step into their peacekeeping officer positions under their discretion, which they have, and help us execute the plans to bring remedy to the American public. That would be the next phase. After we've established the relationship, then we say, okay, so we need you to help us out in your jurisdiction. Help us out on your jurisdiction while we do, and we're going to do our part here in our jurisdiction, and we're going to meet together. So this would be the type of thing that the second level peacekeeping officers will do. And then at this level, though, we also have to introduce the liability here, that if you don't help out, or anybody who don't help out, or anybody who tries to prevent us from bringing these remedies, then they will be guilty of treason. It has, I would say, do that secondary. Because first, we want to get at the negotiating table and see if we can agree on our jurisdictional differences and agree on what the contract employee-employer contract is. Now, if we can, hopefully we can get that agreement and move to the second level where there is a cooperation. But if we can't get that agreement and we have to move to the second level, then we're going to move into a capitulation situation where, we have to be more enforcing at that point. Then after that, the third level is where the liaisons, the county sheriffs, and the county marshals would have to take names of who's not going to cooperate, and who we have to force to capitulate. So that's the third level. And I know I'd heard the Continental Marshals, I think, on one of the replays or something, they have to devise the strategy of how they will do criminal complaints and things like that. So because there has to be a process of, well, what do we do when they don't abide by making me fill out this birth registration before my child leaves out of the hospital? What do I do about that? Who do I report that to? And what y'all gonna do once I report it? So that's all part of this third level here. And then at this third level is where we're going to ask and require that they raise the peace flag, and we're going to require that the correct your political status in the courtyard. What happens when they don't? Do we have an approach for that? Should they have to? Do we have to make them do that, or do we just pass it up and just let them do whatever, that they say? No, we don't have to do that. We're not going to do that. That needs to be ironed out a little bit more. So this is the graduated effort in relationship to what Joe was talking about, the negotiations needing to take place. So this is all the process of negotiating with them and trying to get on the same page. So that's the letter from the executive director of how he's advising us to incorporate some of those ideas, especially that one about the American state citizens, having them be our face out there in that phase 2 and phase 1A. Get into that now. It's going to have a different approach than this one, but I want you to think more about this one and look in the PKTF implementation guide, that section over the week, and shoot me back some emails on what you think about incorporating any of that and fine-tuning that strategy. Okay, so let's move on to the interim report. Now, for the public meetings. Now, I thought it would be best for me to just create an implementation guide for the American state assemblies to follow. And so I did. So that's what this one is. I put that in the chat. Laid out the same way as the other 2 implementation guides. So I'm gonna read out a few sections of these. Some of these sections are from our past sessions that are already included in there. And I was thinking, oh, we done covered this section, we done covered this section, and all those things talk about the public meeting. So I'm just going to create a whole nother implementation guide for just this part. So and remember, we came up with this idea because some assemblies don't feel like they're ready to do the secure the Capitol phase 1 and 2, or they don't have the funds to do the international public notice. That's how this one came to be. And then, as far as we're talking about who should lead this entity, should we wait on our courts system, or is it just the county sheriffs that's going to be the enforcers? What will be the teeth? How will we get them to do what we want them to do? Well, the teeth came to be the American public. So let's go through a few highlights of this guide. The purpose of the teeth is to apply the public pressure that is needed de facto to move in the direction we need them to move in, so that we can deliver a one fell swoop list of remedies to the American people and rein in our lawless employees. This phase 1A is the public meeting that I already have utilized in the project's phase 2 county tour section. However, phase 1A is essentially a standalone phase 2. And as so, it is not a true 7th phase to the project in that regard. So I'm not adding a 7th phase. I'm just adding, creating a phase 1 for those assemblies who do not want to do phase 1 and 2 as it stands right now. Phase 1A is for all assemblies to implement outside of the progression required for the securing the Capitol that includes the International Public Notice campaign. Phase 1A serves to standardize the public meetings agenda. We talked about we need something consistent, something standard that all assemblies can follow when they do these public meetings, so that we don't look bad, for one thing. So we'll be consistent with our message presenting ourselves to the public as a competent American government. So it is necessary. We talked about that in the think tank from the beginning. The public meetings agenda that will be presented across the 50 states in phase 2, and to provide the components needed to run these public meetings in alignment with the objectives of this project. Assemblies who execute phase 1A will schedule public meetings throughout the state on a continuous cycle in whatever communities they choose, with the intent to systematically stand their counties as they go. So in phase 2, the progression, in phase 1 and phase 2, the way it originally was set up was for the International Public Notice campaign to start in where the state capital is. And then a public meeting is held in that county. That's how phase 1 and phase 2 starts. So the assembly would have to have the funds to send out those public notices first. Those assemblies who are challenged with that part, I have this other option that we created. It's called phase 1A, where your first step is to actually schedule a public meeting in your backyard, wherever you want to start. So the assembly would schedule their public meeting at the library, wherever they want to schedule it, but their public meeting will be the same public meeting that the other assemblies who's doing phase 1 and phase 2 are doing. The only part that's being skipped for phase 1 is the international public notice. They won't be sending that out. And that's what you see here in this chart here is a breakdown. In the blue, if your assembly is small in number, you have no PKTF liaison or no county sheriffs, no county marshals, no militia commander, or you have limited funds, you want to start with phase 1A. If your assembly have PKTF liaison, county sheriffs, militia commander, county marshal, and you have funds to run an international public notice campaign, go out with the phase 1 and phase 2 progression. The assembly who goes with phase 1, their main objective is going to be to grow your assembly so that you can elect these peacekeeping officers, so that you can find those people in those communities who want to serve. The objective of the assemblies who's going to do the phase 1 and phase 2, they're going to focus on securing the capital and reining in that governor from the top, so that it can minimize the efforts that assembly is going to have to do to get all the other counties to capitulate and transfer the governance powers back to that state assembly. Because that phase 1 and phase 2, you're going to focus on the higher officer, the main one in that state. So you can see the two approaches here. And now as this project is really developing, the question originally was, how do we start it off first? I originally thought that we would do phase 1, the International Public Notice campaign, then phase 2, which would be holding the public meetings, and then phase 3 kickoff with the PKTF Peacekeeping Task Force leadership and getting all your peacekeeping officers engaged with the governor and everything. But right now, Lavelle, you had mentioned, what about doing that public notice, sending out a radio announcement or something, so that we can all do it at the same time, so one state won't have a chance to stop the other state, or one county won't have a chance to stop the other county's effectiveness. Well, what about phase 1, phase 2, phase 1A, phase 3, jump off all at the same time? I'm thinking now we really don't have to wait for one or the other to be effective. And I'm actually thinking it would be most effective to have them all jumping off at the same time, because I'm seeing entities that's going to be involved here in order to pull this off. I'm seeing we got the phase 1A assemblies who are on a different approach. So their approach is starting off with the public meeting. Then we got the the assemblies who will start off with the international public notice campaign. Now, as I see this, Lavelle, I'm seeing how they're coming at it at a different angle. So they won't it's more of an opportunity for them to kind of approach and keep them off kilter, because you might think all of them is going to do the same thing, but we don't have everybody doing the same thing. We have people coming at different angles. So you can't stop one thing. You'd have to stop all of the things at the same time, because we got different angles being coming at the same time. That's what I'm thinking now. Because on top of the phase 1A kicking off, and the phase 1 and phase 2 kicking off, we got the phase 3 with the American state citizens kicking off, speaking to the heads, the governors and the secretaries of states. We have all of that going on, and that's not even to bring into the picture the other, the fiduciary and the continental marshal aspect of dealing with the diplomatic immunity status that can kick off at the same time too. So that's 4 different avenues coming at the same time to address the issue to our public employees. And we're getting the Americans also involved all at the same time. Lavelle, were you raising your hand?
Yes, and I just wanted to add to that, um, you know, with the global family saying the door is going to be open up anytime soon, right? We got
Yeah.
individual's going to be financed first, and then people are going to be flooding in the doors, and then there's going to be no stopping us because, like what you're saying, we can do all of them all at once, and there's no way that they'll be able to stop all the different ways that, like you said, different angles that we will be coming at them as well, and we won't be hindered because we'll be finances, men and women, people are coming in and everybody's taking their place, and we're a mighty force to be reckoned with. So if it goes like that, the plan is going to be 1, 2, 3, and it'll be beautiful.
Yeah, and think about the Global Family Bank. That's another angle we're coming in at it all at the same time. All right, we did go over this already. The one reason for government. I'm going to highlight this one more time though before I move on. One reason for government: to protect the people and their assets. This is an all-encompassing duty of government in which we have superior concurrent jurisdiction, general jurisdiction on the land. And people means any man or woman who steps foot on American soil, a visitor, an immigrant, resident alien, resident citizen. They can be a U.S. national, American state national. I don't think that our American government's idea of people was just to talk about declared American state nationals. That's what I was bringing forth when I put this together, and we had a discussion on this in one of our sessions. Our duty is to, my 2 working premises here, I wrote it out. I said, number 1, jurisdiction over a man or woman is determined only by either the sovereign national capacity jurisdiction that they maintain, that they're in, or the contracted citizenship capacity of each one who is on American soil. So our duty of government, and somebody would have to correct me and tell me that this is not correct. Our duty as the American government is to protect anyone who steps foot on American soil. You can be in whatever capacity you are in. That's your sovereign right. But our right is to protect you while you are here. So the U.S. citizens got to be protected. The immigrant has to be here on this soil. Then secondly, my premise is our American government protects the sovereign rights and assets of the national and the contracted rights and assets of the citizen. Both are people first and foremost. Just because you decided that you want to be elected to a position or work for the American government or the US government does not remove your right as the people. You have a dual status at that point. And I think I wasn't clear about that when I first became American State National, but I'm more clear now that we need to be recognizing these people in dual status mode. Meaning, yes, I work for the US territorial, but first I'm an American. And they think they think of themselves as an American, not as just a US citizen. They don't really know the difference between that, but it's going to be our job to clarify all of this and get and clean up the lines. See, the lines are kind of blurred as in understanding of what a US citizen is, but we're going to clear that up in our public meetings and everything. So I just want, I just wanted to highlight that one. That's what this whole issue was about when I brought this to the table. But you can go ahead and read all that. Now, apply the public pressure. This is our teeth. This is the teeth that those assemblies in phase 1A that's going to be doing, those assemblies that's going to execute phase 1 and phase 2 are going to be doing. This is the teeth that's really the public meeting. The million-dollar question is how to get the USA, the territorials, and the municipal corporations to stand down, capitulate, or cooperate, whatever word is comfortable with you. They will need to voluntarily cooperate or be made to capitulate. There are no other options. Their concessions to our position as their employers must happen. We can safely assume that the de facto will continue to act like the criminals that they are to increase the chances of achieving the desired capitulation response from all elected officers, meaning Trump, the U.S. Secretary of State, the U.S. Attorney General, the county sheriffs, the state governors, state Secretary of State, so on and so forth. We will apply public pressure, both positive or negative, as appropriate. Now, this public pressure idea I had at the beginning of when I created this project, but at the beginning, I was only focused on the governor and applying public pressure to the governor based on my experience of the Illinois Governor George Ryan experience that I had in one of the grassroots activist projects that I was involved in my local community. Now this project has gotten so big now that we're not just going to be focusing on the governor. We're going to be focusing on all of them. So we have to expand the project so that we can come at the angles we need to come at each of those offices. And one main way I suggested that we do this is to make sure we bring them all together in this under the one umbrella as the federal conglomerate that they are. So even though the state governor or the state secretary of state is talking about they have state sovereignty and they're not the federal government, we know better. We know all the states' governments are only franchises of the federal government. So we want to pull them all together and look at them as that one federal conglomerate and address the issue with that perspective. The teeth to our resurgence project will come in the form of empowering every American to wake up and stand up to their elected public officials by reporting the main two crimes being perpetrated upon us all. The first one is the fraud behind the birth registrations, and the second one is the fraud behind the Federal Reserve notes. Those are the only two that I want to focus on because I think all the other ones hinge on those too. And if we can get clearly focused on that, I think we can get we can implement a better strategy. All Americans, those recorded as American State Nationals, and those British territorial and municipal citizens registered fraudulently on paper will be directed to create an affidavit or testimony to the fact that they have been defrauded and report these crimes to the appropriate public officers to get their attention. This is my way of getting the attention of the elected officials who are our employees. How do we get the one thing that I learned being in grassroots activism is the elected officials do listen to their constituency. So we have, what I wanted to do with the teeth is to get their constituency to talk to their elected officials. If you're not going to listen to me, who's an American State National, you have to listen to them. So how do I get them on the same side with me? I find out what is the common crime that we all are being defrauded. And this is the common crime, the birth registration and the Federal Reserve notes. There is no difference between you a U.S. citizen or an American State National. We all have the same right. So that's why I thought it best to bring to the American public what the issue is. And I have here, the American public is the teeth. We will arm them with the right weapon. What is the right weapon? Their innate sovereignty as free men and women. They know they're free. At least that's their heart. I should say they know they're free, because they do know they're free. They know they're supposed to be free, but they know something is wrong, right? We all knew something was wrong, but we know we're supposed to be free. So they have the spirit of sovereignty. Every American has the spirit of sovereignty. That's why they're here. So I got these 3 documents here provided. We want to provide these documents to the public at the public meetings to arm them with the documentation to reinforce in their minds, yeah, you are free. And you need to stand up for your freedom. We're getting them to stand up with us on the same issue. And now they become our friends. We are both sovereign. You just don't know it yet. Well, I'm going to arm you with the weapon so that you can exercise your sovereignty. And that's what we're doing here with making the American public the teeth. So we already went through the Declaration of Land Law, the 2 declarations regarding the birth registrations, the Federal Reserve notes, and then the criminal information notice of liability regarding those 2. This section here I added, and I thought I needed to add it because I don't think I was getting the message that some of us wasn't clear on what the crime is that they will be guilty of. So I knew based on Anna's articles that the crime is treason, but treason is a high crime. And we also know that they're not in their proper office as under the Constitution, because they're not abiding by the original Constitution. They're abiding by corporate constitutions. So I went into Anna's articles and pulled out a few examples of how are dealing with treason. And these examples here, they will be guilty of treason by commission, meaning the act itself, the acts themselves that they do is treason. Based on this particular article here, she says, since 1991, there has been no 3-branched federal government. The judicial and legislative branches have been merged, and the judicial has been made subservient to the legislature. Moreover, the municipal government of the United States has been acting in open treason. So when you are acting in open treason, that's commission. So I charge you with treason based on your actions. That's one way that we charge them with treason against the actual Constitution since 1991. And absolutely no decisions undertaken by these federal judicial officers since then have been compliant with the actual Constitution. So we charge them with treason based on the actions that they actually do. Now, this is one reason why I think it's important that the American state citizens, the peacekeeping officers, go directly and have a sit down. We're going to ask for a sit down with the governor, a sit down with the Secretary of State, a sit down with the U.S. Secretary of State. It's important that we ask for a sit down with them so that we will be able to point to the evidence that says this person did or this person said. That would be our evidence of the person in action failing to abide by the Constitution. That's why it's important that we have a sit down to collect evidence, because we're going to need evidence to tell the American public and to tell the American public who's cooperating, which elected officials, their elected officials are cooperating, which ones are cooperating, and why we are charging them with treason. We're charging them with treason because their actions say are treasonous. The other reason we can charge them with treason by omission. Now I'm not going to read this whole thing, but this one is about HJR 192 and the Public Law 7310, which legalized the actions of the offending corporations suspending the gold standard. Now I'm just going to read the section down here. When they did that, this foregoing results in unlawful conversion of credit owed to the American people being made available instead to foreign corporations. That's what they did when they suspended the gold standard, merely claiming to represent us, and also funded the credit exemption upon which the debt write-off and discharge remedy is supposed to be based. And such remedy is necessary both in law and at law to exempt Congress from charges of treason. Okay, those laws that they put on the books was necessary to exempt Congress from charges of treason. This is treason by omission. They put those laws there, but they didn't tell us about it, give us access to it. And they're still not giving us access to it. That's treason by omission, when you omitted telling us what the laws was or what our remedy was that you had to legalize in order to do that crime you are in process of doing. So we can charge them this, and this is related to the Federal Reserve notes, which is one of our declarations of land law and one of our part of our criminal information notice of liability. So we charge for treason by omission of what they've already done. And if we tell them, okay, you need to give them remedy, a mutual offsets credit exchange or zero exchange exemption when they are purchasing or wanting to have government services, you need to give this to the people. But when they don't give it to the people, they're involved in treason. And that will be the charge. The third way that they will be guilty of treason, in one of our articles here, it says any officer, corporate or otherwise, of the United States is, or its government, however defined, who fails to take immediate and forceful action to correct and remedy these practices and issues in favor of the American people and the states of the Union shall be in full admission of treason. So you can admit it. Admit that you're going to just not do it. Admit that I don't have to do what you say. That's just treason, just by your admission. So yes, our charge is treason. You can go through all of the other articles Anna has, but I just picked those three to give an example of what we're charging them with when it comes to treason and what categories treason actually can fall under. Treason by commission, treason by omission, or treason by admission. They're guilty. So that's part of that I put it here in the implementation guide. Now I'm going to go down. We've already talked about the declarations of land, law on the land, and the criminal information. So let's go down to this other section here that I added in here. And this is the implementation guide for the state's assemblies. All right, so this is part of what I already sent to you in the Session 4 interim report last Sunday. Now, in holding the public meeting in regards to the birth registrations, imagine what happens if we no longer allow birth registrations. What political status would that make every man and woman born in America by default? You see where I'm going with this? Now, if we got rid of birth registrations, then what political status would they be? So it's time, I said, to elevate our approach to this rescue mission we embarked upon. Let's take it to another notch. We have been telling people to correct their political status by recording on the public record that they are an American. Let's stop giving the appearance that we are upholding the birth registration as a valid contract that people have entered into, when on the contrary, it is void for fraud ab initio. The birth registration resulting in a birth certificate on its face is fraud. So how do we start treating it as such? We enforce our fiduciary's directive and require all status corrected Americans and U.S. municipal citizens alike to do the same. Now, this is part of, remember, this notice of liability we went over in our last session about the birth registration. I'm just going to read part of it to remind us. The only persons born in this country who might actually adopt British territorial citizenship in a limited and temporary basis are the mercenaries serving in the U.S. Armed Forces, and the only ones who might similarly adopt the status of citizens of the United States are the federal civil service employees. Nobody else would receive any equitable consideration for their losses of property, guarantees, and other benefits, and would have no reason to voluntarily adopt these foreign citizenship obligations. Anyone caught using or soliciting, seeking to subject, entrap, ensnare, or otherwise encumber American babies or adults via this foreign legal scheme without full disclosure, so as to impersonate and denigrate and unlawfully convert the victim's political status, will be subject to immediate arrest and execution. Well, she said it. So it's our job to get it enforced. The birth registration should not even exist. She says up here, this section right here, we wish for this entire system of registering babies as property belonging to the municipal corporation franchises to be dismantled. Let's do it. Disallow registrations. And how do we go about doing that? Well, before I answer that question, let's continue. How does the public meeting, how do you hold the public meeting where you convey to the American public the need for them to tell their elected officials that we need to get rid of, we're going to have them tell their elected officials, we need to get rid of the birth registration. Why? Because I'm involved in human trafficking. You see, she says, anyone caught, that includes the public. If that U.S. citizen who says they're an American is filling out that birth registration, they're also, that mom and that dad, that grandmother, that power of attorney, they're also complicit with human trafficking. We have to let them know that. We have to tell them this is why they have to stop filling out these registrations. We have to tell them this is why we have to disallow this particular type of document. And it's a commercial bond. We have to disallow this from here on out. Let's bring that fact into their reality. That's what I say here. The birth registration should never existed. Let's stop emphasizing the presumption as if it's a ballot by telling Americans they are slaves, meaning U.S. citizens. We tell them they are slaves when they simply can't be lawfully because the birth registration is invalid ab initio from the beginning. They are actually more correctly stated. This is what I would say we use instead. They're stateless. Don't use the word slaves. Tell them they're stateless instead. Tell them stateless means that they have no place to belong until they declare so. That is a lonely feeling and will tug at their emotional strings. That's saying that, no, you're not an American, but you're not a slave either, because birth registration is dismantled. So what are you going to be? Well, this will put the responsibility and right into their consciousness and back onto them for them to allow themselves to be labeled as slaves if that's what they want to be. Since we and our employees are in a transitory phase, we still need the individual to correct their political status, but our messaging as to why needs to change. They need to correct their political status because the birth registration is fraud. And you can only take on legitimate U.S. citizenship in actuality by a fully disclosed contract, that's what that should be, that you have signed. And if none exists, you have been rendered a bonded slave, which is a crime. Our question to everyone in attendance in the public meeting, this is what I would start it with. Do you work for the U.S. government or one of its state-of-state municipal government franchises? Please raise your hand. Were you born in the District of Columbia or in one of its territorial jurisdictions like Puerto Rico, Guam? Please raise your hand. To those who have not raised their hands, you are not U.S. citizens. Point blank. The only way you can be a U.S. citizen is you have a contract or you were born in the District of Columbia. Other than that, there's no other legitimate way. And we have to convey that to the public. We have to get that straight in our minds. Stop calling us slaves, because we're not. We're just stateless. You don't have a place to belong, because that bond, that commercial bond, is outlawed. Slavery has been outlawed in America, and now that the American government is in session, we are outlawing the birth registration process in America because it is used to render you, who have not signed a contract in full disclosure, into a bonded slave twice. You got your U.S. territorial birth certificate, and you got your municipal birth certificate. So it's twice. If you want to adopt citizenship, we are requiring that the U.S. government provide you with the bona fide contract for you to sign, because the birth registration process will be henceforth punishable as a crime. And that actually goes for everybody. That's kind of heavy. I know that's kind of heavy for people to swallow, but that's the reality of the truth of the birth registration. The fiduciary said anyone. That includes mom and dad. You no longer can register babies, your babies. Now it's 5:30 now. I know we've been going for a moment. I'm not sure if you all want to continue on. Do you have any other time?
It's up to you. It's sounding really good.
Okay, I'm gonna go for maybe another half an hour. Then we'll call it, since we started late. Okay, so you can stop registering your births in hospitals, or you will be complicit with the crime of enslaving your child and guilty of human trafficking. We have to make that clear. And I think approaching it this way helps them to see that we're doing our job as the American government. And we're trying to protect them as their American government. Protect you from slavery. That's what we're doing. We're outlawing this birth registration because you've been enslaved unbeknownst to yourself. And to some degree, I'm saving you from yourself. So we have to convey this to them. So I'm not going to go through all of this here. But we explained to them, you can adopt U.S. citizenship if you want to, because it's a legitimate citizenship, but there's only a few ways that you can do it. So we tell them at the public meeting, those of you who did not raise your hands are unfortunately stateless. That means you have not declared your nationality. You have to take the steps to declare on the public record the political status you wish to adopt. You have options. You can claim your birthright political status, We tell them about how you can do that, filling out your declaration, recording it on the Land and Soil Jurisdiction Assembly of your state. You can adopt U.S. citizenship status as well by applying for a job with the federal government or one of its state-of-state franchises or municipal franchises. You can adopt citizenship that way. You can adopt municipal citizenship by applying for the job for the subcontractors for the post office or whatever municipal franchise there is. You can do all three if you would like. I was just being funny on this one. Although holding 2 9-to-5 jobs is a bit much for anyone, I would think. So we're teaching them and showing them there is a legitimate way and lawful way to do this. And these are your lawful options. You can be a U.S. citizen if you want. You can be a municipal citizen as you if you want. But you don't have to give up any of them. Actually, you don't have to give up any of them. You can declare your birthright political status and you can get a job with the U.S. government. You can do that. I don't think we've been clear enough with that information. I want them to feel like they're not giving up something that they want to have. So if you want to be called a U.S. citizen, this is the legitimate way that you can. We've been on a mission to get all the Americans recorded by first getting them over the hurdle of their ignorance, and second, by getting them past their fears. Can you see how much harder that makes our job? Has anyone studied Harriet Tubman? How do you free a slave? What you don't do is tell them they are a slave. That was part of the brainwashing agenda to keep them in chains. You tell them they are free. That is what inspires them to escape. That's what I think the message needs to be emphasized at this public meeting. They know they're free. They're in America. America is a free nation. We need to empower them and give them the weapons to exercise that freedom and tell them what has been trying to enslave them. And they will lose the change themselves if we keep emphasizing to them, you are free. These are the chains you need to break yourself from and avoid. Although this was the best remedy we had to offer the individual man or woman to take in order to stop being presumed to be a U.S. citizen by telling them, that, you're a slave, the bond is, the birth registration is made you slave and all this. We're getting rid of it. We don't even have to talk about them being a slave because we just outlawed it. Let's tell them they're free. The American government is now in session. The better option now is for us, the employer, to start reining in our employees. Our conversation needs to be a little different now. Our messaging to the public needs to shift to being the ones in the driver's seat and no longer defaulting our authority to our employees or conceding to their usurpation. Take our property and our labor force back. Before the birth registration started, what political status was Americans considered then? Did they have to record their birthright political status then? Let's bring back that reality. Then I put an article here about Anna, from Anna, where she said when the birth registration started in 1921. Now I'm going to skip that and go to the reserve notes. Now, in the public meeting, how do we prime this conversation? So we just talked about how to prime the conversation when it comes to the birth registration by telling them that they're free and telling them, raise your hand if you born in District of Columbia, raise your hand if you work for the federal government or the municipal government, raise your hand. Anybody whose hand is not raised, you're not a U.S. citizen, point blank. Now, for the Federal Reserve notes, how do we convey this in a simple and tangible, easy to comprehend terms? At the public meeting, what if you simply ask everyone in the room, pull out the largest bill in your pocket or purse and hold it in your hand. This bill in your hand, no matter what number designation is on it, it is an IOU. And every last one of these that you have in your pockets are the exact same thing, an IOU. You or your fellow American have given your labor, given your products you've created for sale, or provided your professional or contracted service to some corporation, some business, or some individual, And what did you get as payment in return? You got that which you have in your hand. It's an IOU. Do you know what that actually means? That means that you are still waiting to be paid. So is your parents, so is your grandparents. As long as these IOUs have been circulating in our economies, no one has been paid, but instead you have been given a promise. You know, when your friends tells you, I'm going to pay you back tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. That's what's been happening with these IOUs. And we keep calling them IOUs. No longer call them dollars. Just call them IOUs in these public meetings. Just call them IOUs. And just get used to just calling them IOUs. They are not dollars of anything. Just like we know the birth registration is not a valid contract. So stop treating it as such. We begin to treat the IOUs the same way. Dollar is a measurement of silver or gold. That's what I understood it to be. A dollar is a measurement of something tangible. Fiat currencies are credit notes representing the dollar that is owed to its recipients. They are a bill, but they are not a dollar. We can call them bills, we can call them IOUs, but we should not call them dollars. Make the relationship, we call them notes. Make the relationship in their minds how bill, quote unquote, and Federal Reserve notes, quote unquote, are one and the same. They know what a bill is. I'm trying to use some language introduce some language that you can use at these public meetings to connect with what's already in their consciousness. Make the relationship in their minds how a bill and the Federal Reserve notes is the same. Tell them who owes who when these bills are being passed around. Going into this being the true cause of inflation, maybe a little bit too much, but you can go into why this is causing inflation, but you make that decision based on the aptitude of your audience. You don't want to lose anybody, but you might want to talk about this is the reason why you got to work harder for the same amount of these bills you got in your hand. Then tell everyone in the room, pull out a credit card, any credit card you might have in your pocket or your purse. The credit you are borrowing against with that credit card is your own credit. The bank that gave you the card has no actual money to lend anyone. All corporations, like the bank, your grocery chains, your department stores, your colleges, your electric companies, literally, all of them fall in the same category. All corporations are borrowing your credit to operate their businesses if they are using these IOUs to exchange with you. Just think about that. How dumb does that sound to be borrowing your own credit to pay back yourself? Why not just access your own credit in your own right and get rid of the middleman? I pulled out one of the articles to talk about the reserve and how it came to be. That's where we can talk about our global family bank and how the American government is bringing the remedy to the people and saving them from themselves, because we continue to use this Federal Reserve note as if it's something which it's not. So we bringing forth that understanding that we are the value, not these currencies that we have circulating around. You'll want to go a little bit into who is responsible for the Federal Reserve's notes monopoly, because it's a monopoly. You can't use any other deals in circulation, and the consumer credit fraud scheme. Who's responsible? The U.S. military and the central banks. So we're going to have to talk about Trump and the U.S. military and their QFS system and all of this. Doing so will connect the dots as you present our one fell swoop committees, our insistence that Trump and the U.S. military deliver on those promises after 160 years of perpetrating the fraud. These are the two fundamental crimes that will be the focal point in the public meetings. As a follow-through to exposing these crimes, we need to then invite them to take action and become part of the systemic solution and getting the remedy we all deserve. Emphasize the importance of them doing so and the impact it will serve in getting the de facto to hear and listen to the voices of the people loud and clear. Holding our public meetings, following this template that I have laid out, is the best way to teach people without overwhelming them. This is my opinion. Lay the concepts down in their psyche where it already fits. So some of the language that I chose here, I'm connecting it to the language in their minds that already fit, that they already understand what it is. Dealing with their belief systems should not be handled in a public meeting. That is a larger task to tackle, and your state assemblies have an education committee for that. Now, I can't emphasize that point enough. We can't get into debates of law, debates of, well, you know, this and that. We as the American government have to tell them what the law is. Tell them how we are protecting them and their assets. Tell them what the crimes are, and tell them they're going to be guilty of these crimes if they continue it as well. And tell them if they're forcing you to be part of the criminal activity, then you need to do an affidavit or testimony and attach it to that Federal Reserve note or attach it to that certified birth certificate and send it to your Congress, send it to your senator, send it to the U.S. military, send it to these people and tell them that they are causing you to be subject to this crime and causing me to be part of it. That's how we connect in their minds the actions that they have to take and why it's necessary for them to take these actions and not try to hold on to the belief system. You're holding on to being a criminal. That to them. That's what they're holding on to. The belief system in the Federal Reserve notes or the birth registrations, you're holding on to being a criminal. So we're not going to be dealing with trying to dismantle the belief system. We're just going to tell them what the law is, what the crime is, what your remedy is. In this resurgence project, I'm right here, we plan to build an online education platform tentatively to be called States National University and an online government library to put education on steroids. So this is going to be provided for the public once we build these two platforms so they can get educated. Because to rid yourself of false belief systems, you're going to have to dig deep, repeat. That's not what the public meetings are for. The public meetings is the place where the government tells their constituency or the American public what the government is doing and what things we're going to be providing, what services we're going to be providing for them. That's what a public meeting is for. It will be open to the American these platforms that the think tank is thinking about developing. These platforms will be open to the American public without requiring memberships or login permissions for them to learn about these things we will be telling them about. I know we have different state assemblies membership requirements to look at particular information. Well, that's not going to be the case here with our American State Nationals University and with our government library. It's going to be a place where people can come and learn about all these things. And the think tank is putting together those platforms and stuff and laying it out of how we want it designed. That's where the international forum comes in, and then the other bringing everything together in one place. That's what we're trying to do with that. We are taking our position as the government. We must start acting like a government. Hold a public meeting and tell the people we are in session and that our job is to protect them and their assets. Tell them how we will be doing that. Public meetings are typically the official and expected forum a government does this. Again, the language that they already know and understand, public meeting. They know why you come to a public meeting. That's why I'm calling it a public meeting. I'm connecting their minds, their psyche with things that they already know. How do we earn recognition and respect as the American government by the American people? How do we do that? We stand up and be their government and demonstrate our authority to put our employees in check and protect them, the people, and their assets from our employees' criminal activity. How to do that? we take away from our employees the glue that keeps their fraud going. We outlaw the birth registration and the blood money credit theft monopoly scheme they have going with the fiat Federal Reserve notes. Those two things, if we focus on those two crimes, it's going to set the stage for our one fell swoop list of remedies. Because then they have nothing, the employees have nothing to stand on to say that it's legit. Nothing that legit that they say. And the American public will know this. And the American public, who are US citizens at this point, until they record their status, declare the birthright status, they're going to be letting their own officials know the score. Hey, these aren't legitimate. You got to do something different. Present to the American public the proposition of a systemic solution that is currently being negotiated with our federal employees, and present with the one fell swoop list of remedies that we are negotiating with our employees to require their assistance in rolling them out to the American public, and then to provide a one fell swoop list of appropriate remedies for the respective nations of the world too, for that matter. So we're going to be transparent with the American public in these public meetings. Be transparent with them about the fact that the outcome of these negotiations will weigh heavily on the American public taking swift action to put the declarations and criminal information notice of liability with their affidavits on the desk of their elected officials, their senators, congressmen, representatives, so on and so forth. We need to inform the American public that we are in negotiation with our employees, trying to get them to roll out this one fell swoop list of remedies, which we're going to present to them at the public meeting. Tell them these are the remedies that you should have had. These remedies we're requiring that our employees to roll out for you. Now, with you putting your affidavit and your criminal information notice on their desk has a profound effect on how fast we can get these rolled out. Will have a profound effect on those elected officials listening to the American government. So they have a role to play in claiming back their own sovereignty. And doing this strategy, I'm bringing up, creating this as the teeth. We're putting that responsibility on them, but not just putting it on them. We're giving them hope that there are remedies. We're empowering them. This is how we can come together and make it happen. Even though it's been 160 years coming, if we all get on the same page together as one, as the people, we the people, they know that term too. We get all on the same page as we the people, because they are the people. Everybody is the people. Taking on US citizenship is just a job. You're the people first. So get that in their minds and get them on the same page with us. Then we can make a quick remedy to this too. Be transparent with the American people that our federal subcontractors who have been in charge, which are the US military and their selected presidents, have made promises to the American people. Your American government, who is now in session, is here to put their feet to the fire and make sure your unalienable rights are restored and recognized as bona fide Americans first and foremost. And US territorial municipal citizens who have temporarily adopted foreign political status will also be able to enjoy the same when you end your tour of duty. The state assemblies must make every effort to reach every county in their state to give public notice, inform and educate the American public of the systemic effects and criminal intent of the birth registration and the blood money credit theft monopoly scheme with the fiat Federal Reserve remedy for these crimes. Stand up those counties systematically as you go. So whether the assembly choose the approach of phase 1A of just holding the public meetings in their backyards or wherever community they decide, or whether the assembly choose phase 1 and 2 and doing the international public notice and then holding the public meetings, their end goal, both of them, is still to spend counties as they go along having the public meetings. They don't want to lose sight of that. So as people are declaring their statuses on those counties that wherever their meetings are being held, they will be populating their counties as well, and then standing them counties up and getting those public officers elected, that county sheriff, that PKTF liaison, that militia commander, getting their juror assemblies, all those things also established, regardless of whether you go with phase 1A or phase 1 and 2. Then we got the list of remedies. Then I put in here also the discussion points. We talked about this in the last session, what should be the content or agenda of the public meeting. So I wrote that out. And then I added this. There's going to need to be a follow-up public meeting too, because this is going to be a lot to cover, and the people are going to have questions. Then they're going to go home and look at the information that you gave out at the public meeting, and then they're going to have more questions. So you should probably plan to have a second public meeting that these same people will be able to attend. But of course, you're going to ask them to attend your assembly meetings and stuff like that. But your assembly would plan to have the first public meeting and then a follow-up public meeting. Yeah. I thought this would be good. And then at the end, I got the whole mind map put together there. And this would be the official implementation guide for the state assemblies and how to run these public meetings. And that's this document that I want to share with you all today. Any questions? Any comments?
I mean, it just looks great. Great plan. You just have to implement it. See what everybody else has. Any thoughts on it?
All right. All right. So I'm going to well, you got all the documents there, and I'll send out the replay here later. And then we have our next session. Do we want to have the next session? Well, the next session is after the holiday, which is January 5th. So we should be okay. We should be okay for January 5th. Now, let me go back to my agenda, because I forgot some things last time. Now, in the next meeting, we won't do it here now since it's just a few of us. The next meeting, I want somebody to volunteer to do a map to monitor the progress of the assemblies who chose for phase 1A, a map of which states those are, and then a second volunteer to monitor those assemblies. When I say monitor, I mean to create a map and put on your map which assembly chose phase 1A, and you be the one responsible for keeping track of that. And then the other volunteer create a map where you put on that map the assemblies who chose phase 1 and 2, and you monitor the progress on that, of what assemblies are actually going to be implementing those phase 1 and 2. So we need 2 volunteers, at least 2 volunteers to do phase 1A monitoring map and phase 1 and 2 monitoring map. And we were going to use those as we continue our meetings to assess how the progress is going and assess what challenges these particular states are doing. And then we can see if there's a commonality, a common thread with phase 1, with those particular assemblies, what commonality might they have going on, and be able to kind of address some of those issues and change a few things and adjust as we go along. We can do the same thing with those states that's doing the phase 1 and 2. We can see how effective one is over the other, or what areas, even the states across the nation have different mindsets and things like that. And we can kind of assess and analyze as we go along, even about, different mindsets across the country, and might have to change something or adjust something because of it. So next session, I'm going to ask for 2 volunteers, but go ahead and send me an email if you already want to volunteer, you can send me an email, say, hey, Louise, I want to do this map. The other thing I want us to think about is alternate our strategy sessions to cater to each of these groups. Because meaning maybe we're going to plan or schedule for one session to be about the phase 1A. Then maybe the next session be about the phase 1 and 2. For those assemblies who want to talk more about how that strategy should go before they get out there and do their public meetings and answer their questions. So I was thinking about in future sessions, divide out the sessions and focus on those different things. And then the other session, we're going to have a separate session for phase 3 for the officers, the peacekeeping officers. Now, I did ask Joe if we could have a training series specifically scheduled for the phase 3 peacekeeping officers, the county sheriffs, the county marshals, the PKTF liaisons, all in the same training as they prepare to approach phase 3. And we'll talk about what documents they need to have in hand, and about the declaration, the criminal information, notice of liability, and how the enforcement will go. That will be a different session too, that we will have to set aside and probably schedule for. So that's 3 different types of sessions, strategy sessions, and I'm foreseeing that we will be best for us to split off and have during these times. But I want you to be thinking about that too. All right. All right. So if there's any other questions before we call it quits? All right. All right, then. Well, we will meet back January 5th. Thank you for being here. You all have a good night.
Thank you. Great job.
All right.